I've said it before and I'll say it again. Overall, Twilight Masquerade is a mid-set. There's 167 cards and 10% of them are playable. Yes, we're getting a brand new BDIF in the form of Dragapult EX, but after that it trickles off considerably. Still, 10% of 167 is at least 10, so that means I have enough content to make a list of the top 10 best new cards coming in Twilight Masquerade, which releases on May 23rd in Pokemon TCG Live. Remember when Marnie was standard legal and you'd get Marnied into nothing on turn 2, losing the game as a result? Well, you'll be yearning for those days when you get Unfair Stamp to 2 on turn 2. The best new ace spec coming in Twilight Masquerade, Unfair Stamp activates as soon as your opponent takes a knockout. When they do, you force both players to shuffle their hands into their deck. They draw 2 cards while you draw 5 cards. Unfair is more than a fair name for this. Now players have to think twice if they want to take a knockout turn 1 going second. Take Future Box for example. It already struggles with drawing cards. Come Twilight Masquerade, if they take an early KO using their Miraidon, they could find themselves with just 2 cards in hand on turn 2. So masterfully baiting your opponent into KOing an early Charmander or Pidgey or Bidoof or Comfey is going to be a good thing. And oh yeah, it's an item-based shuffle draw to 5, searchable with Arven, Irida, and Pokestop, and can be put back on top of your deck with Silene if you want to stamp them every single freaking turn because that's something you'll be able to do. The stats on Blood Moon Ursaluna EX are absolutely insane. Not only is it a 260 hit point basic that deals 240 damage, but it can attack for as little as 0 energy. Yeah, Ursaluna isn't great in the early stages of the game. The attack requires 5 energy, making it fairly useless. But as the game progresses, Ursaluna's attack costs 1 less energy for each prize card your opponent has taken. Here's a handy little cheat sheet to help with that. Depending on how much energy acceleration is in your deck, Ursaluna probably won't be online until your opponent's taken 3 prize cards. Then you can attach a double turbo energy and deal 220 damage. Or wait until they have 2 prizes left and do 240 damage for 1 energy. Or wait until they have 1 prize left and do 240 damage for free. While every deck can theoretically play Ursaluna, the 2 best appear to be Lugia V-Star and Lost Box. Lugia can use Archeops to attack with Ursaluna literally right away, though you'll still want to prioritize Cinccino and wait until it's cheaper to attack with Ursaluna. Lost Box, meanwhile, will do its typical Lost Box things early, then once you have 7 cards in your Lost Zone, boom, Mirage Gate to your Ursaluna and start swinging big. The only drawback is that Ursaluna can't attack in back-to-back turns, but Lugia plays 4 Jet Energy and Lost Box plays several switch cards, so it's not a big deal for them. We'll have to wait and see if Dragapult EX's longevity in the Pokemon TCG is longer than its chonky little legs, but for now it's at number 3. One of many reasons being, it forces every other deck in the format to play suboptimal 70 hit point basics. Commanding as much as a 30% share of the meta in Japan, Dragapult EX does 200 damage for a Fire and a Psychic Energy, while also spreading 6 damage counters to your opponent's bench Pokemon. Manaphy can't stop it, neither can Jirachi, Rabsca is their only hope, and that has its own issues. Basically, in order to just not lose to Dragapult, Charizard has to swap the 60 hit point Charmander for the 70 hit point one, Bidoof goes from having a bench barrier ability to sucking, and Frigibax goes from having a 1 retreat cost to having a 2 retreat cost. And all of this is just to stop the secondary effect of Dragapult EX. The energy requirement that is sometimes awkward for Dragon types is no issue for Dragapult. Charizard and Mela can accelerate Fire Energy, Xatu can accelerate Psychic Energy. And don't forget that Neo Upper Energy also works on Dragapult, allowing it to attack for a single energy attachment. And oh yeah, it's also a 320 hit point Pokemon with no weakness. If you've ever stared down a Giratina V-Star and failed to one-shot it, you know how annoying big dragons can be. Although it might deserve its own spot on this list, I'll load Dracloak into the cannon and fire it off here. This card is crazy. How crazy? Imagine if Kirlia could draw you cards every single turn. Okay, well, it already can. But you know what I mean. Rather than rushing to get Dragapult into play with Rare Candy, Dracloak allows you to take a slower approach. Now, for each Dracloak in play, you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck. One goes into your hand, the other goes to the bottom of your deck. And for those of you worried about playing a weak Dreepy, don't be. It has 70 hit points, making all 3 of these cards great. Before we get into the pilot makes terrible choices that will age worse than his ex-wife portion of the video, I'll go with the safe bet and put Totsadiri in 4th place. Do you remember the Jirachi estate board combo we had a few years back? This isn't quite as good, but slap a rescue board on Tatsugiri and now you can search the top 6 cards of your deck every turn for a supporter, then retreat it to the bench. And yes, they had an opportunity to call the ability Stellar Fish, but instead decided to go with Attract Customers, because they want grown adults to say the words attract customers to each other as much as possible. At its core, Tatsugiri is just a Pokemon-based Pokegear that can be used every single turn. Mew from Celebrations had the same ability but for items and saw play, and that was in a format without Rescue Board. Tatsugiri gives pretty much every deck a great starting Pokemon, whether you're going first or second. It searches for a supporter, can retreat easily, and is a perfect target for Technical Machine Evolution turn 1 going second. That's because it can find Arven, which gets you an Earthen Vessel or Buddy Buddy Puffin and TM Evolution. Plus, the 70 hit points means it's not getting knocked out right away by Dragapult pings. It'll be knocked out one turn later though. My number 5 pick goes to Jamming Tower solely based on its potential. Think of how many heavily played tool cards there are in Standard right now. There's Maximum Belt, Hero's Cape, Ancient Booster, Future Booster, Bravery Charm, Forest Seal Stone, and all the technical machines. Now imagine they don't work anymore. That's Jamming Tower. Slap it down, every tool card attached to a Pokemon in play loses its effect. Actually finding Jamming Tower won't be the easiest thing. Pidgeot EX can manually search for it, or you can Cypher Maniac it to the top of your deck, but if it can stick, you screw over a lot of decks. Gardevoir EX will absolutely need to bump it, otherwise they can't do increased damage with their Screamtail and Drifloon. Or if you play Tower after they've overdamaged their Pokemon, you get a free prize and can attack right after. Lugia appears to be the best partner for Jamming Tower as it doesn't play any tools, though any deck that isn't tool heavy can take advantage of it. If not for Dragapult EX and Greninja EX, Iron Thorns EX would have been much higher on the list. But those damn Stage 2s took a big number 2 all over Lightning Tyranitar, sending it down to number 6. Still, the effect is insane, basically giving you a Pokemon-based path to the peak, something we've desperately been missing since rotation earlier this year. As long as Iron Thorns EX is in the active spot, Rulebox Pokemon don't have abilities except for future Pokemon. That means heavily played cards like Charizard EX, Pidgeot EX, Radiant Greninja, Radiant Charizard, Lugia V-Star, Gardevoir EX, and so many more no longer have access to their abilities. A quad Iron Thorns deck was a thing in Japan a month or so ago, but it looks like Iron Thorns will just slot into existing future decks. This gives them a great Pokemon to start turn 1 going second that can retreat for free with Future Booster. It also has access to Heavy Baton and Electric Generator, and if you decide to attack with Iron Thorns, it sends an energy back to one of your bench Pokemon. Iron Thorns' existence will essentially force Lugia and Gardevoir to play Flutter Mane, otherwise they just kinda lose. I know I might be overvaluing Legacy Energy a bit, but at worst it's a Rainbow Energy. At best, it's a Rainbow Energy that denies a prize card. As long as Legacy Energy is attached to a Pokemon, it provides every type of energy but only one energy at a time. And if the Pokemon Legacy Energy is attached to gets knocked out, your opponent takes one fewer prize card. Obviously, the best partner for Legacy Energy is Lugia V-Star. Easily acceleratable with Archeops, Legacy Energy allows Lugia to play a variety of different attackers, including Iron Hands EX, Radiant Charizard, and the new Water Ogerpon EX. Ogerpon does 100 damage and spreads 120, and best of all, it shuffles all that energy back into your deck, meaning you can do it all over again the following turn, provided it survives. It's the same story with Lumineon V. If you had to put one down early to get a supporter, attach Legacy Energy and 2 more energy, then send Lumineon and all that energy back into your deck. These shuffle strategies are a bit risky though, as they remove energy from your board, freeing up your opponent to just hunt Archeops. But the versatility Legacy Energy can provide is amazing. Okay, I've held in the crazy long enough. Carmine is my 8th pick, and you can't stop me. One of the worst things to happen in 2020 was when the Pokemon Company changed the rules so that you couldn't play a supporter on turn 1. Carmine does away with all that. If you go first, you can play Carmine to discard your hand and draw 5 cards. I've seen Lugia V-Star decks in Japan play as many as 4 copies already, though the actual number you want is probably closer to 2. It just depends how desperate you are to have a fast start, and Lugia is the one deck out there that's desperate enough to both go first and be willing to discard their entire hand. Using Carmine on turn 1 means you also don't have a risky Squawkabilly EX on your bench to dig deeper into your deck, and Carmine also pairs well with Tatsugiri, potentially giving you a turn 1 supporter play. If you disagree with Carmine at number 8, just remember that the last turn 1 supporter was Beauty, and it was booty. I still think the potential of Kieran is too hard to ignore. I mean, we had Leon see some play back in the day. Why would Kieran be any different, especially when it can also be a switch card in a pinch? When you play Kieran, you choose to do one of the following. Switch your active with one of your bench Pokemon, or have your attacks deal 30 extra damage to your opponent's active V or EX Pokemon. That 30 damage boost can help Dragapult take a one-hit KO on a Chien-Pao EX or Iron Hands EX or Roaring Moon EX. It's also useful for Charizard EX. With Kieran, if your opponent's taken 0 prize cards, now you're doing 210. Attach a Vitality Band, it's 220, a great number right now for things like Chien-Pao EX, Arceus V, and Giratina V. Or if your opponent's taken a single prize card, you're at 240 with Charizard with just one Kieran, able to one-shot every meaningful basic Pokemon except Ursaluna. And later on in the game, it allows your Charizard to one-shot a Dragapult EX or fellow Charizard EX when your opponent's taken 4 prize cards. I don't think Kieran is more than a one of in a handful of decks, but being able to buff 2 of the best decks in Standard right now can't be overlooked. And to finish myself off, I thought it'd be fun to include the 2 reprints, Enhanced Hammer and Scoop Up Cyclone. If you object to putting 2 cards here, remember that this is my video and you have no power here. Anyways, Enhanced Hammer will be extremely useful at bumping Mist Energy and Legacy Energy, and maybe even Neo Upper Energy against Dragapult decks that think they're cute. But Mist Energy will definitely be the biggest target. Now, decks like Roaring Moon EX and Giratina V-Star have a way to one-shot big targets like Dragapult and Charizard again, should they decide to attach their Mist Energy. And then there's Scoop Up Cyclone. The effect is simple, put a Pokemon and all attached cards back into your hand. It's basically just an item-based penny that works on everybody. The problem is that it's your ace spec. So if you're running Scoop Up Cyclone, you're not playing Prime Catcher or Maximum Belt or Unfair Stamp. Still, Scoop Up Cyclone could be really annoying if there's a deck with a high HP Pokemon that doesn't have a weakness which you know will tank a hit against most decks. Oh right, I forgot. And those were my top 10 best new cards coming in Twilight Masquerade, which releases on May 23rd in PTCGL. If you think there's any cards missing from the list, let everyone know in the comments. Otherwise, make sure you're subscribed so you'll know the second my crafting guide goes live.